The road to Red Dust wasn't on any map. Just a trail of bones, silence, and mistakes I'd rather not remember. The sun hung low that evening, a red wound bleeding over the desert. You could smell iron in the air, like the land itself remembered violence. The town was small. One saloon, a general store, a sheriff's office with dust thicker than the law it held. No one looked me in the eye, but everyone knew I didn't belong. That's how frontier towns work. They can smell a stranger faster than a storm. I tied my horse outside the Red Dust Saloon, and when I pushed through that door, I swear the whole place stopped breathing. Cards froze midair. Whiskey glasses hung halfway to their mouths. And somewhere, a piano key died in silence. It wasn't the first time a room went quiet when I walked in, but somehow it felt like the last. The first thing that hit me inside that saloon wasn't the smell of whiskey. It was the silence, thick and heavy, like a prayer that had lost its faith. Men sat hunched over their drinks, pretending not to stare. A few nodded, slow and cautious, like folks do when they're not sure if you're trouble or the end of it. Behind the haze of cigar smoke, a woman stood at the bar. Red hair, tied loose, eyes sharp as desert glass. She wasn't like the others. She watched me the way a hawk watches a dying rabbit, curious but already certain of the outcome. I tipped my hat. She didn't smile, just turned away and filled another glass, slow and calm. That's when I felt it, the room's attention shifting. Not to me this time, but to the man walking in from the far end. Boots polished, badge gleaming through the dust, grin too perfect to trust. Sheriff Elias Moore. He had the kind of presence that made the floorboards listen. Came up beside me like we were old friends, though we both knew better. "Don't recall seeing you around, stranger," he said. "Maybe that's for the best," I answered. He chuckled low and dry. "I like a man who minds his business, keeps the graveyard quiet." The whole saloon laughed, a forced kind of laughter, the kind that dies before reaching the walls. I raised my glass but didn't drink. I could already taste the danger in the air, bitter as rust. Then she started to sing, the woman from the bar, Clara Wynne. Her voice cut through the smoke like rain through ash. It wasn't a loud song. It didn't need to be. It was the kind that crept under your skin and reminded you of the things you'd buried to survive. Every word carried the weight of someone who had lost too much and still stood up every morning to face what was left. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until the last note faded. She glanced my way again, and for a heartbeat I saw something in her eyes. Recognition, or maybe warning. As the crowd went back to their games, she walked past me, slow and quiet. When she leaned close, her words were softer than smoke. "You should leave before the sun sets, cowboy," she whispered. "This town eats men like you." I turned, but she was already gone, disappearing into the back hallway. And in that moment, I knew two things. First, that Red Dust was rotten to its core, and second, that I wasn't leaving. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind crawled through the cracks of the room I rented above the saloon, carrying with it the sound of boots, laughter, and lies. I sat by the window watching the empty street below. Even in the dark, Red Dust looked sick, like a wound the desert had tried to forget. Every town has a story, but this one whispered mine back to me. There was a time, not long ago, when I worked for the railroad. Me and a man named Jonas Pike. He had a smile that could sell you your own horse, and hands dirty enough to bury a secret. We ran cargo across the southern line, gold, silver, sometimes worse. The pay was good until one shipment went missing. They said I took it. Jonas swore he saw me do it, and just like that my name turned poison. I ran before they could hang me, but I never stopped feeling that rope brushing the back of my neck. Next morning I went down to the saloon. The town was quieter than usual, too quiet for daylight. Clara was cleaning tables, her red hair tied back, humming the same tune she sang the night before. I nodded to her, but she didn't look up. "Rough night?" she asked. "Rough life," I said. That got her to glance my way. Her eyes were softer this time, like she saw something behind the dirt and dust I carried. "You owe someone," she said. "Don't we all?" She smiled, the kind of smile that hides 1,000 regrets, and slid a plate toward me. "Eat," she said. "Men who run too long forget what hunger feels like." For the first time in months, I did as I was told. Elias Moore found me before I finished the meal. He pulled up a chair, the wood groaning under his weight. "You're new here," he said, "which means you're either running from something or toward it." I didn't answer. He dropped a small stack of wanted posters on the table, my face among them. That smile of his widened, slow and mean. "You got a price on your head, cowboy. But I'm a fair man. You work for me, and maybe red dust forgets what it knows." His words came easy, but I could feel the noose behind him. "What kind of work?" I asked. He leaned in close. "The kind that keeps this town running, and the kind you don't talk about when the church bells ring." That night I stood by the stable, watching the sunset paint the sky the color of old blood. If I left, the sheriff would send his dogs after me. If I stayed, I'd end up one of them. Then Clara stepped out from the shadows. "You shouldn't have talked to him," she said. "He doesn't make deals. He makes graves." I looked at her, at the dust on her hands, the faint bruise on her wrist. "Why are you still here?" I asked. She hesitated. "Because someone has to remember what this place used to be." For a moment, the world went quiet again. Just wind, sand, and two souls too tired to keep running. I didn't know it then, but I just made my choice. And every bad thing that followed started right there in the dying light of red dust. The next morning, I woke to the sound of boots outside my door. 3 pairs, steady, heavy, and sure of themselves, the kind of rhythm that doesn't knock before entering. When I opened the door, Elias Moore stood there with 2 of his deputies. His hat cast a shadow across his smile, the kind of smile that meant bad news wrapped in good manners. "Rise and shine, partner," he said. "Got some business that needs your touch." I didn't recall being his partner, but when a man like that tells you to ride, you ride. We walked down to the street, the dust still wet from last night's rain. A wagon waited near the edge of town, and beside it, a man hanging from a post, his boots missing. The sheriff glanced up at him like he was checking the weather. "Horse thief," he said. "Justice served before breakfast." His deputies laughed. I didn't. We rode east past the dry riverbed. The sheriff talked the whole way about order, progress, and how he was bringing civilization to the desert. But every mile we crossed, I saw more graves than fences. Every lesson he spoke of seemed to end with someone missing a home, or a brother, or both. He stopped near a burned ranch. Charred beams stuck from the ground like broken ribs. Smoke still rose from what used to be a family's kitchen. "You see, stranger," he said, "out here the law ain't words on paper. It's whoever's willing to stand in the smoke and say, 'This land's mine now.'" He turned to me, that smile never leaving his face. "You're a man who's run before. I can use that. Men who've lost everything work cheap." I didn't answer, but inside something old began to stir. The part of me that once believed there was such a thing as right and wrong. That night, Clara found me outside the stable. She'd been watching the sheriff, too. Said men who smile that much don't do it 'cause they're happy. They do it 'cause they know something you don't. "Elias took this town one lie at a time," she said. "He burned the ranch you saw today. Said it was bandits. He's planning something bigger, something worse." She handed me a folded piece of paper, a list of names, most crossed out. "These were the folks who stood up to him," she said. "One by one they vanished, My brother was the last name before yours." I looked at the paper. The last line read, "Jonas Pike." That name hit me like a bullet I'd forgotten to dodge. The man who'd betrayed me was already part of Red Dust. Later that night, I saw Elias again, alone at the bar, polishing his badge under the lamp's glow. He waved me over. "Funny thing," he said, "how some men think they can outrun their past. But the desert's got a long memory." He slid a wanted poster across the table. My face again. But this one wasn't from New Mexico. It was fresh, printed right here in Red Dust. "Seems we got a new outlaw in town," he said. His grin stretched wider than it should have. That's when I realized the truth. The sheriff didn't just run the law, he was the law. He wrote the crimes, picked the guilty, and cashed the rewards himself. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. 'Cause every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile again, and the way it didn't fade, even in the dark. Nights in Red Dust had a way of stretching longer than they should. Maybe it was the silence or the kind of darkness that made you feel like God had stopped looking this way. That night, the saloon was quieter than usual. Even the piano seemed to be holding its breath. Elias Moore had left town for the evening, riding out with a few men. No one asked where. I sat alone at the corner table, nursing a drink I couldn't afford and memories I couldn't forget. Then she walked in, Clara Wynne, wearing that same red dress that caught the light like a dying fire. She didn't look at anyone, didn't need to. When she stepped onto that small wooden stage, the whole room turned to stone. She started singing without a word of introduction. No band, no piano, just her voice against the hum of the wind outside. It was a slow, mournful tune, the kind you hear once and carry in your chest for years. Her song spoke of a brother who rode out one morning and never came back, of a town that forgot his name before the ground cooled over his grave, of a woman left behind, holding on to a promise that turned to smoke. Every note trembled, not from fear, but from truth. And when her eyes met mine, I felt the kind of ache that don't heal with whiskey. When she finished, no one clapped. Some looked down, others just drank deeper, 'cause songs like that don't ask for applause. They ask for silence. Later, when the crowd thinned out and the smoke lost its shape, I found her standing behind the saloon, hands wrapped around a match, trying to light a cigarette that didn't want to burn. "You sang for him," I said. Her eyes didn't lift. "I sing for everyone who's gone," she whispered, "but mostly for the ones who stayed." I told her I knew what that felt like, that I'd lost someone too, though mine was still breathing. She looked up then, and there was a softness in her face that didn't belong to this place. "Maybe we're both ghosts," she said. "Only difference is, you still think you're alive." The wind picked up, and for a second, the lantern beside her flickered like it might go out. But it didn't. Neither did she. Before she left, she reached into her pocket and handed me a small brass coin, old and scratched. "My brother carried this," she said. "Found it where they shot him." I turned it over. On one side, a train worn down from touch. On the other, the initials J.P. Jonas Pike. I froze, and the world just seemed to tilt for a moment. Clara saw it in my face. "You knew him," she said. "Once," I answered. "Long enough to wish I didn't." She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "If you're staying in this town, you'll have to choose between burying your past or letting it bury you." Then she walked away, leaving the scent of smoke and whiskey behind her. And I stood there under that weak lantern light, holding a dead man's coin, and realizing the past I'd been running from had already found me. The next few days felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. The townsfolk spoke quieter, drank faster, and prayed less. That's how you know something's coming. Word spread that Elias Moore had bought new land out east, prime soil near the old riverbed. Land that used to belong to the Harland family, before their house went up in flames one night. No one asked questions. In red dust, questions got you buried before sunrise. But I remembered the smell, that same iron and ash from the ranch he showed me. I thought it was a warning. Now I knew it was a pattern. I started keeping my gun closer, sleeping with one boot on, 'cause a fire like that doesn't stop where it starts. It spreads. One evening I found Clara outside the saloon, watching the horizon glow faintly red. "They burned another one," she said, her voice low, like speaking too loud might summon it closer. I didn't need to ask who. There were fewer lights and red dust every night, and more smoke behind the hills. I asked her why people stayed. She said, "Because leaving means losing everything, and staying means hoping it won't be your turn." Then she looked at me, her eyes hard as flint. "Which kind are you?" I didn't answer, 'cause I wasn't sure anymore. A few days later, the sheriff threw a celebration. New ownership of the East Lands. Whiskey on the house, a new sign in the street, and music loud enough to drown the screams of memory. He called me up to his table, said he wanted to talk business. "You got a reputation, son," he said. "Quick draw, quiet tongue. The kind of man who don't ask where the gold comes from." I told him I wasn't interested. He smiled, that same smile that could rot a man from the inside. "Everyone's interested," he said. "Some just take longer to admit it." He slid a bag of coins across the table. I didn't touch it. When I stood to leave, his voice stopped me cold. Jonas Pike spoke like that, too. The name cut through me. I turned, slow, careful. He was still smiling. "He thought he could change things," Elias said. "Turns out the only thing men like him change is how deep we dig the graves." That night I rode out past the edge of town, where the wind smelled like cinder and sorrow. I found what was left of the Harlan ranch. Black timbers, scattered toys, a kettle melted into the dirt. And beside it, a single boot print, sharp, fresh, the kind made by the sheriff's boots. I knelt, ran my hand through the ashes. They were still warm. That's when I realized the truth. Red dust wasn't dying. It was feeding on itself, on fear, on silence, on men like me who stood and watched. Behind me, the wind shifted. I turned. For a heartbeat, I saw a flicker on the hill. Another ranch, already burning. I didn't ride back to town right away. I just sat there staring at the fire dance against the night sky and thought about how every flame starts small, but always remembers what it wants to become. It was near midnight when I saw her again. The moon hung low over red dust, and the wind carried that dry, restless smell, like the desert was waiting for something to burn. Clara stepped out from the shadows behind the stable, her face half lit by a lantern, her hands trembling around a cigarette that had long gone out. "You shouldn't be out here," I said. She smiled faintly. "Neither should you." We stood in silence for a while, two ghosts hiding from a world already cursed. Finally she spoke. "They burned the Harlan place," she said. "I saw the smoke before anyone else did. And I saw him there, too." She didn't need to say his name. I already knew. "The sheriff," she nodded. "He's buying up what he burns. Calls it progress. Says he's cleaning the land for the railroad." I looked at her, and for the first time I realized she wasn't afraid. She was angry. The kind of anger that don't fade, just waits for the right spark. She handed me a folded letter, edges burned. Inside was a list of numbers, train schedules, and names. Jonas Pike's name was there, too, underlined twice. "My brother found this before they killed him," Clara said. "He said the sheriff's been dealing with the railroad company. Money for silence, land for graves." I stared at the paper. So that was it. Jonas hadn't betrayed me. He'd been trying to stop the same man who was now wearing a badge. "Why show me this?" I asked. "Because I can't do it alone," she said, "and you already owe him more than I do." She wasn't wrong, but I'd spent too long running from trouble to go inviting it home. Still, there was something in her voice, the kind of truth a man can't walk away from. The wind picked up, dust swirled around us like ghosts listening in. Clara stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the smoke on her skin. "If we do this," I said, "there's no turning back." She looked up at me, eyes bright, defiant, alive. "There never was," she whispered. Before I could think of what that meant, she kissed me, soft, quick, like a secret too dangerous to keep. For a moment, the world went still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then she pulled away. "You'll know when the time comes," she said. "Just don't ride off before it does." And with that, she disappeared into the dark, leaving me alone with a letter, a promise, and the taste of smoke still lingering on my lips. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't even try. The paper burned in my pocket like it had a heartbeat of its own. Jonas Pike, the sheriff, the railroad, and Clara Wynne, all tangled up in one fire that was waiting to start. When the first light touched the horizon, I saddled my horse and looked back at Red Dust. It sat quiet, still, almost peaceful, the way a snake looks before it strikes. I told myself I'd ride away, that I didn't owe this place nothing. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face in that half-light, and I knew I wasn't leaving, not yet, because some debts ain't paid with money. They're paid with fire. The next day came slow. The sky was pale and tired, and even the wind seemed cautious, like it knew something bad was stirring beneath the surface. I tried to keep busy. Cleaned my gun, checked the saddle, fed the horse like I planned on riding out soon. But I wasn't going anywhere, not until I understood what Clara meant by, "You'll know when the time comes." The sheriff was gone again, riding toward the burned ranches with his men. Said he was inspecting damages. What he was really doing was making sure the ashes didn't start talking. By sundown, the sky turned red, the same color as every lie told in this town. And that's when she came to find me. She found me behind the saloon, the same place we met before. Same lantern, same silence, but this time her hands weren't shaking. "They're moving the gold tomorrow," she said. "Railroad shipment. Elias is taking it for himself and blaming the bandits." I stared at her. "That's suicide, Clara. You know that." "Maybe," she said softly, "but if nobody stops him, this place'll burn for real. Not just the houses, the people, too." She took a step closer, close enough for me to see the small scar on her lip, and the way her eyes looked when she'd already made peace with hell. "Help me stop him," she whispered. "For my brother. For your name. For every grave he's buried under his smile. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was me. But our lips met like two storms colliding. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't clean. It was everything this town wasn't. Honest. The dust swirled around us, and for a moment, Red Dust didn't exist. Just her heartbeat against mine, and the taste of whiskey, smoke, and something like hope. When we finally pulled apart, she laughed under her breath. "Guess that makes it harder to run," she said. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I smiled. Wasn't planning on running. We didn't see the deputy until it was too late. He'd been watching from the shadows, one of Elias's dogs, mean, silent, loyal for the right price. By the time I reached for my gun, he was already riding off. Clara cursed under her breath. "He'll tell Elias," she said. "We've got hours, maybe less." The spell broke. The warmth vanished. The desert went cold again. I took her hand. "Then we don't waste 'em." She nodded, and for the first time, we stopped being two lost souls and became something the sheriff should have feared. As we saddled the horses, the wind howled through red dust like a warning. And I knew then, the fire Clara spoke of wasn't waiting anymore. It had already started. Morning came cold and colorless, the kind of dawn that don't belong to the living. Clara and I met behind the blacksmith shed, the only place in red dust where the noise covered whispers. She unrolled a torn map on an empty crate. Train routes, guard posts, the path to the ridge east of town. "The gold leaves Lincoln at noon," she said. "Elias plans to stop it at Dead Horse Crossing. He'll kill the guards, take the shipment, then pin it on bandits, the same ones he made up months ago." I nodded slow. "And we stop him?" She looked at me, her voice steady but her hands shaking just a little. "We stop him, or we burn with the rest." It wasn't courage in her eyes. It was something sharper, the kind that's born when grief forgets how to cry. We left before noon. 2 horses, 1 rifle, and a plan that wouldn't survive the first bullet. The desert stretched endless and pale ahead of us. Dust rose under the hooves like ghosts trying to catch up. Clara rode beside me, wind pulling her hair loose, eyes fixed on the horizon, where the tracks cut through the earth like scars. We didn't talk much, didn't have to. Every man and woman riding into hell knows silence is the only prayer that matters. By the time we reached the ridge, we could already hear it, the train, that slow, thundering heartbeat of the West. Elias and his men were already there. 6 horses hid behind the rocks, faces wrapped in cloth, guns gleaming under the sun. The sheriff himself sat calm, smiling like the devil signing his own sermon. "Right on time," he said, watching the train approach through his spyglass. "To justice and new beginnings." I crouched behind a boulder, my rifle cold in my hands. Clara was beside me, breathing fast, eyes wide. "This is our chance," she whispered. "Wait for him to fire first." The whistle screamed through the valley, and the train rolled closer, a black beast dragging its scenes behind it. Elias raised his hand, then dropped it. Gunfire tore through the quiet. Bullets sang, metal screamed, and the whole desert came alive with chaos. I aimed for Elias, but he was faster. His shot grazed my arm. Mine hit the man beside him. The sheriff didn't even flinch. Smoke covered the ridge. Men fell, horses scattered. Clara fired twice. 1 hit, 1 scream. Then a spark caught on the dry grass. The whole ridge lit up like Judgment Day. Elias turned, smiling through the chaos. "You think you're stopping me, son?" he yelled. "You're just lighting the fuse." Before I could answer, he kicked his horse and rode straight into the flames, laughing like a man who'd already made peace with hell. Clara grabbed my arm. "We have to go." We ran down the ridge as the fire spread, the heat biting at our backs, the air thick with smoke and screams. Behind us, the train derailed, crashing in a roar of metal and gold. The ground shook, then quiet. That awful kind that comes after the world decides who gets to keep breathing. We stopped miles out, horses lathered, lungs burning. Clara sat still for a long time, watching the column of smoke twist up to the heavens. "Did we stop him?" she asked. I looked back at the horizon, black and red, same colors as every mistake I ever made. "I don't know," I said, "but he sure as hell ain't done yet." She turned to me, eyes glinting with something that wasn't hope, but wasn't surrender either. "Then neither are we." And in that moment, with the fire still burning behind us and the desert turning gold in the distance, I knew red dust had finally chosen a side, and so had I. We rode back into red dust before sunrise. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and iron, the scent of what's left after men call it justice. The train lay broken miles behind us, a twisted monument to every bad decision we'd made. Clara didn't speak much on the ride. Neither did I. Words were too heavy for what we'd seen. When we reached the edge of town, the streets were empty. Not dead, just waiting, that kind of quiet that tastes like trouble. I told her to hide at the boarding house till nightfall. She wanted to argue. I kissed her once and said, "Please." That was enough. She went. I should have kept riding, but I didn't. By the time I reached the saloon, the door was already open. 2 deputies stood waiting, rifles low but ready. "Sheriff wants a word," one said. Their eyes looked too calm. That's when I knew. They led me through the alley behind the sheriff's office. The dirt smelled wet, like rain was coming. Elias sat at his desk, clean boots, clean smile, like he hadn't just burned half the desert. "Well," he said, "you made quite the mess, son. I stopped you from taking that train." He chuckled. "No, you started the story I needed. Train robbed, guards dead, gold missing, and a stranger riding into town the same week. Can't write it better than that." He dropped something on the table. Jonas Pike's brass coin, the same one Clara had given me. "Found this near the wreck," he said. "Seems your old friend never learned when to stay dead. They took my gun, my hat, and my name, threw me into a cell that smelled of dust and old scenes. I heard laughter outside. The sheriff telling his men to start printing the posters. Train robber, murderer, $500 reward." I sat there a long while, listening to the floorboards creak above me, wondering how many lies it took to build a town like this. After some time, a shadow appeared by the window. It was Clara, eyes red, hands shaking. "They know everything," she whispered. "He's saying you killed Jonas. He's got the town believing it." I smiled, dry and tired. Then I guess I'm famous. She didn't laugh. Instead, she pulled something from her coat, a small iron key. "I can get you out, but you have to promise me something." "What's that?" "When this is done, you leave. Don't look back." When night came, the door creaked open. She slipped in like smoke, eyes darting to the hallway. "Quick," she said. We moved through the dark, past the cells, past the office where Elias's coat hung on the wall. There were papers on his desk, maps, deeds, and a letter with the railroad seal, proof of every lie. Clara grabbed them and shoved them into her bag. Then we ran. Outside, the rain finally broke. Cold, hard, merciless. Thunder rolled across the desert. We didn't speak till we reached the stables. I turned to her, breathing hard. "You risked everything coming for me." She looked at me with that same steady fire. "I already lost everything. Might as well finish the story." Behind us, a whistle sounded. Voices shouted. The hunt had begun. We rode into the dark, rain hitting our faces, the sheriff's men right behind. And as lightning split the sky over red dust, I realized something. This wasn't escape. It was the beginning of the end. We rode through the storm till the town lights appeared again, faint and flickering. The sheriff's men were close behind, their torches glowing like the devil's trail. Clara pulled her horse to a stop on the ridge. "End it here," she said, "before he takes everything." Below us, red dust was already burning. Elias had set the saloon on fire, proof and distraction in one blaze. We rode straight into the chaos. Gunfire, screaming. I saw Elias near the gallows, his badge catching the firelight. He smiled when he saw me. "I told you, son, you'd light the fuse." I fired once. He fell without a word, and for a moment the whole town went still. The kind of quiet that ain't peace, just exhaustion. The flames spread fast. Smoke wrapped the street like a shroud. Claire and I fought our way through the alley, every corner another ghost with a gun. When the last shot echoed, I turned and saw her fall. One bullet, right below the ribs. I caught her before she hit the ground. The fire painted her face gold and red, like she was already half gone. "Did we do it?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "It's over." She smiled once. Then the world went quiet again. But this time it stayed that way. I buried her by the river that hadn't seen water in years. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low, heavy as guilt. I didn't pray, didn't know how anymore. I just stood there, hat in hand, watching the wind steal the last of the smoke from town. I left the brass coin on her grave. Jonas's initials faced the sky. "Guess he got his redemption after all," I said. Then I mounted up and rode toward the empty horizon, the sound of hooves the only heartbeat left. Days passed, or maybe weeks, didn't matter. Every road looked the same, dust, bones, and regrets. I rode through ghost towns, past crosses without names, past the edge of the map where the land forgets itself. Some nights I thought I saw her, in the glow of campfire smoke, in the hum of wind against stone. But ghosts don't talk back. They just listen. I kept riding, 'cause that's what men like me do. Move on, even when there's nowhere left to go. Now I sit by the fire, older, slower, watching the flames dance the way they did that night. Elias, Jonas, Clara, Red Dust, all gone. But they never really leave, do they? Maybe justice ain't something you find. Maybe it's something you leave behind, burning in the places that deserve it most. I take one last sip of whiskey, look at the stars through the smoke, and say the only prayer I remember. May the fire never die, and may the dust never settle.